Hi everyone, welcome to our module number 7 in our group theory and practice class. The topic today is diversity in group setting, and this is your instructor Ildiko Ran. So first of all, I want to start thinking together with you about the various different kinds of population we work with in our groups. So there is a broad range of diversity. We are thinking about race, ethnicity, we are thinking about sexual orientation, gender, we are thinking about age, the different ages our group members are. We are thinking about socioeconomic status. We are thinking about immigration status, or whether or not this person is part of an established generation in the country we are leading our group in. We are thinking about language differences, cultural differences, religious differences. And of course, this list can go on, and we really want to think about in what are the populations that we are serving in our groups. And sometimes we are not even thinking about the type of diversity that maybe our clients are bringing in. And it is important to always stay open to that they might be representing a group of people that we haven't even thought about to include maybe on our map of the diversity. And so why is diversity important in group theory and group therapy? When we are thinking about diversity, we want to use the diverse populations in our groups, and we want to use the people, the group members, or their background for mirroring, for projections, and especially to overcome those projections in the group setting. And the more diverse our groups are, the more chance we have in our groups to eventually come to a deep sense of universality, which might be jarring for some group members and might be a surprise benefit of group therapy, how they can actually see universality among other diversities that they didn't even expect that they would be able to reach that understanding in a group setting where they came for a different purpose, for their own therapeutic reasons and goals. So we again want to differentiate between process groups and support groups when we are talking about diversity, because in a process group we want to have as much diversity as we can include in the group, whereas in a support group there will always be one unifying principle, one or several unifying principles based on which we are picking the group members for the support group, because they will be getting the support around certain common issues. Nevertheless, even in support groups where there is one or a few unifying principles among the group members, they are usually still very diverse in other aspects of whatever other groups they are representing in the support groups. But in process groups, we definitely we are picking people who are coming together from very diverse backgrounds. So we might want to think how much diversity is conducive of the therapeutic outcome. We want to have people who have similar functioning abilities, similar mental health, so that they would have somewhat similar ability for insight, and that can be helpful when we are leading group discussions. It's more helpful if our members are able to handle similar kind of discussions on the group level, and also if somebody is either has less or more ability for insight, it can be boring for them, or things are just not, the group is not addressing those issues that those specific members might need. So that there you want to gauge some similarities in that sense. And then with the list that I had on the first slide, you are thinking about those different ways of how people differ from each other. So you want to feel how much you are comfortable personally or clinically at your developmental as a clinician. What How broad range of diversity you are comfortable handling, and then also you want to see what your group members are comfortable handling. Usually you don't have very specific ways to be very exact in when you are picking your group members. You really are just looking for red flags or things that would be overwhelming for the group or for specific members. So usually you are not handpicking your group members so much. Usually things just come out as you started or come up as you already started the group. And in your assessment sessions, you are more looking for those red flags that you know that would be troublesome for some members to be included in a group together. When we are thinking about diversity in the group setting, we want to think about our own biases and countertransference, or as the group leader, as the therapist. So we want to think about our own feelings about our own diversity, in what ways we belong to what subgroups in society, and how entrenched we are in that role, and how identified we feel with that, and how comfortable we feel as a clinician bringing ourselves with our background into this leadership role. So most of the time it's really helpful in this sense if you have had individual therapy, if you have been in various group settings, so you had the opportunity to work through your own background. And again, biases, countertransference. And when we are thinking about diversity, we also want to think about the objective and the subjective countertransference. So that might help to think about when we have a certain countertransference towards certain group members. We can gauge if it's our personal countertransference, if we are the only person in this room, let's say, who feels towards this client this way, or is it more that would be a subjective countertransference, or is it more of a general countertransference that maybe several of us feel, yet it's still countertransference. And then of course you want to differentiate between countertransference and biases or prejudice, definitely. And then this next slide is about subgroups. When we are working with a group that has the various diversities among the members, we want to manage it. We want to watch for members to self-identify their own subgroups based on their diversity. So it's also very helpful if we, the group therapists, we are not putting people in boxes according to the diversity that we believe that they belong, or whatever subgroups or social groups they belong to. But we are more in an observer role, and we want to wait and see how they self-identify, because that has a more immediate, more important role, how they view themselves and how they view each other. Of course, we have our own understanding as the group leader, and we want to keep that in the background. And whenever it surfaces, if let's say it is a group where they are too afraid or shy away from difficult issues around diversity, if we have some understanding around that, of course we can bring that in a way where we would maybe observe or suggest some ideas that they all feel but they might not be comfortable bringing forth. But as an important beginning step, I would say that wait and watch how people self-identify. And we want to manage these subgroups once people identify with certain subgroups or social groups, or or groups based on that list on the first slide. And as soon as we get a sense that people are they feel like they belong to a certain subgroup, either a social subgroup outside of the group, or even within the group, they start setting up the subgroups in the room. We want to really watch out for the projections, for the biases, for transferences, all those issues that will come up as the group is the microcosm where these issues that might be very hot topics in the outside world, they will leak into the group setting, and we really want to work with that to keep it safe for everybody, but again keep it also effective and not just brush things under the carpet, under the rug, so that we would address those if and when those are needed. There is also an important issue here with the stages of group development. So initially, the members will seek safety. They will look for ways how they belong, how they are similar to each other. So usually at this stage, the diversity will not come up as a head-on addressed topic. Usually people will be careful identifying the subgroups and the different populations that some of the group members belong to. It will be probably a cautious way of figuring out and not trying to bring up any deep-seated feelings, hurt feelings or angry feelings that might have happened with people in their outside life. But so once the safety established in the group, which we already talked about this before, how then the projections surface stronger. So that's when you really have to watch out for what's happening between these subgroups, or especially if there are people who are individuals who maybe represent a subgroup, a social subgroup, or racial or ethnic or immigration status, or based on any of those attributes that we list under the types of diversities. We really want to watch out when there's only one person in one of those categories, and see how heated the feelings become around that. Feelings and projections, because I want to emphasize that you really want to see how those are projections that when it comes to diversity in the group setting. If these group dynamics are strong and you, the leader, you get involved in reenactment, which most likely you will, we always get involved in reenactments in the group settings, or if you are aware that you have a certain countertransferency that might be somewhat disturbing your abilities as a capacity as a leader. So you definitely want to seek consultation. Either if you feel that the group is becoming too heated around the diversity issues, either implicitly or explicitly, this is a time when you really want to seek consultation. And in the group setting, you always want to look for the underlying human needs and issues. So even though we are not used to looking at those underlying issues in our outside life, outside of group life, when we are thinking about diversity, or maybe we are thinking about it, but it's really difficult to address those with people in the room who represent different minorities, different diversities. It can be a very sensitive topic, but it's definitely something we want to work on in group. You also want to remember that many of these diversity issues would come with a lot of stigma and shame. We want to be aware, and we want to be really sensitive to that. That even if it's not our experience, but when it comes to diversity, very often shame, stigma is involved, and you want to listen to that again from the group members' own telling their stories or their feelings, that when they are identifying those issues, those feelings and past experiences that might point to shame and stigma, you want to tread carefully, and you definitely want to address it, and you want to support the member who brings it up, because they are in a really vulnerable place when that is happening. And eventually, I trust that eventually we always find in a group therapy setting the underlying universality, but it really takes careful and respectful interpersonal work, and it might take several weeks, months, over a year. You have to tread carefully. You want to work with the interpersonal issues. You want to work with the projections. But I do believe that through those personal stories that people are sharing, the personal experiences, a broad range of diversity can be really addressed in a very healing way in a group setting. I also wanted to mention substance use, which is a particular kind of diversity, how people relate to substance use, substance abuse. If a person has a personal history of substance use, people who are in recovery, if it's not a specific group for, if it's not a support group for people with a history of substance use, then it might come as a surprise for you or for other group members who have sensitivities around. There can be one person can be in A or in the 12-step program, and another person might be in a harm reduction program, or there might be people who group members who might not be addressing their substance related issues, and those can be again very sensitive and very personal issues, that even if the person did not come specifically to work on their history or on their feelings, experiences around substance use, it can really come up based on the differences in the room. So it can be really a hidden subgroup in this sense. And I want to talk a little bit about discrimination, which really I have been talking about discrimination when I'm talking about our outside life, but we also want to think about the internalized aspects of discrimination, the internalized racism, the internalized homophobia, and this is kind of a deeper layer of discrimination. And we not only want to look at projections, but we also want to look at these internalized feelings when a person is addressing somebody else, and how or it will bring up the projective identification. So this is where it kind of becomes a little more complex, how you are conceptualizing what's happening in the room among your group members. And diversity is a very broad topic. It has different people address it very differently, and the people have very different attitudes towards the diverse populations in the room. So it's from some people, the same issues can bring out really explosive conversations, feelings, whereas another person might really just acknowledge it on a cognitive level, but it won't really be so strong for them. I also want to mention transgenerational trauma, which can be, again, a somewhat hidden history, because it's not so much of personal history of trauma, but something that has been inherited through generations and generations. And actually, in a group setting, it can again come out very strongly how our transgenerational trauma affects our personal intimate relationships, which many of us haven't really been considering, haven't thought about it. We know our own personal histories, or we know about our grandparents and the previous generations, what large social pressures or social trauma they went through. But very often we don't really feel the immediate effects on our inner psychodynamics. But in a group setting, it can come out very strongly. There is actually quite a bit of research and thinking has been done in recent years. If you're interested in this topic, you can find books and articles about transgenerational trauma and how it affects group work. I do think that group therapy can be the hope and healing for transgenerational trauma, because this a group setting can be a place where you are bringing in, sometimes intentionally. There are some groups that work with people from different backgrounds who actually have been on different opposing ends of a transgenerational traumatic social political situation. Sometimes they actually bring them specifically into a group together to work through that very hidden yet very rigid transgenerational trauma in the generation that's now here working on their own psychodynamics. So in a group, as I said earlier, through that personal relationship that we develop in a therapy group, these transgenerational, long-standing trauma, hurt feelings, pain, anger, rage can actually be worked through. This is one opportunity for that. And this is our chance that we can stop the chain of this transgenerational trauma with looking at our human similarities and celebrating and respecting diversity. And again, this next slide is about how healing happens through group work. I believe that the intimacy that we can develop in a group setting, that intimacy can heal, and the more intimacy develops among the different people in the diverse groups, subgroups within our therapy groups, that intimacy has a very strong power. And when, as we learned in the stages of group development, when a group goes through those conflict stages together, and they heal, they stay together, everybody survives, everybody learns more about themselves, everybody takes back their projections, and there is really great power in that, and it can heal long-standing hurts and trauma. Again, through personal stories shared, we find our universality. And overcoming that conflict and seeing that everybody benefits from that overcoming stage, it reduces discrimination against others, and we can better relate to each other. I think it is very important that you look out for your group as a whole and for the individual members. So it's your job to safeguard your group. You initially set up the group rules that will help you establish and maintain the safety. So it is very important that when you start the group, you not only assess your group members, but you also set those expectations, the rules, the group norms. You have some of them written down in your contract that everybody, all the group members read and agree to before they can join the group. But you keep reminding them, and you keep reminding them of those rules, and really all those rules just play the role of creating more safety in the group. And again, without brushing the difficult issues under the rug, but you still keep it on a safe level. You have to insist on safety, and sometimes you just have to use your authority if someone does not obey the rules. So if there is any name calling, or anybody gets up from their seats in a moment of heated discussions, especially if something around such sensitive issues as diversity, you really want to watch out, and then you use your leadership skills to set those limits. And not only you will help the other group members to feel safe, but also the person who acts out, who maybe gets really agitated or angry, what they also need a person in the authority position who will set those limits and set those rules. So somewhere that's what they are asking for, and that's what you need to figure out, how in your authority role you can be a nurturing, loving presence, but really set limits when you need to do that. I mentioned at the beginning about the support versus process. Support groups and process groups, they both have plenty of diversity in them. You want to really emphasize confidentiality. It goes back to the group rules. It is very important when people are discussing issues around diversity, because very often these topics are taboo topics in your group members' families or social circles, and they might be talking or even just being with other people from other subgroups that maybe their families or social circles don't approve of. So you really want to make sure that all your group members remember confidentiality when they're discussing these issues. And again, letting members lead their way into their subgroup. We are not imposing titles on them. It's again something that I already mentioned at the beginning, that we let our group members tell us what subgroups they belong to. And so this is our final slide here, the summary. Diversity is the bread and butter of group therapy. This is really what we use as our tool, and also we aim towards a healthy understanding of diversity and a healthy integration of diversity. A group therapy or group setting is a very human experience, and diversity is everywhere in nature, everywhere in society. So naturally, when we come together in a group, diversity will come up. We are all diverse people. And the group setting mirrors this diversity with a hopeful outlook for healing. And I cannot really emphasize this enough, that diversity is very important to think about, to include people of various diversities, not to shy away from the topic, discuss it. And I believe that it can be a very hopeful and helpful place to digest and to discuss interpersonally, feeling, experiencing the the relationships among diverse group members. Well, and that is the end of this lecture. Thank you for your attention, and I will see you next week.